for the last 18 months, I've gone through cancer treatment. The diagnosis is where we're at, it's not who we are. I've had to stop fighting and I've had to surrender and give in, and I'll just be with whatever shows up.
Hello and welcome to the Lost and Found podcast. This is a conversation about being human and peace of mind being closer than we think. And today I'm joined by Sarie Taylor. Thank you for being here, Sarie.
Thanks for having me, and you got my name pronunciation spot on first time, Dan.
Well, I did actually, in all honesty, I had to watch another video just to see, is it Sarie, is it Sarie? I'm not too sure.
Oh, well, you did well. You did
Yeah.
well.
Um, so yeah, when I have looked up, a few different videos and um a few different things about yourself, Sarah. I've seen one thing that stood out to me was, I suppose, your story about how you was hospitalised for a month
Hmm.
and now you're someone that helps people find peace of mind.
Yeah.
Would you be all right just to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, excuse me. So, I ended up being hospitalized in my early 20s. And to be honest with you, Dan, if you'd have met me up until that date, you'd have thought I was really confident and outgoing. You would never have put me down as anxious. And, even when I ended up hospitalized, my friends were like, how is it you that's ended up in there out of all of us? You're the most laid back person ever. But actually, now when I look back, I see that I wasn't. I would just put on a front really to I was very, probably you could describe as cocky, to be honest. And that was a defense mechanism. It was kind of like, oh, don't mess with me kind of thing. And that was very much how it was. And it built and built and built over the years. And then I'd been off to university. I'd been traveling with my now husband and, seemed pretty normal, regular life. And looking back, actually, I always had headaches, always felt a little bit unwell. Like I think there was a lot of physical manifestation in my body from feeling anxious and stressed all the time, but I would never have recognized it as that. Um, and it then I think I'd had like a bit of an infection or something. I was a bit run down, not very well, and all of a sudden I ended up in this vicious cycle and this spiral of panic, to the point where I wouldn't leave the house. So I went and moved in with my mum for a couple of weeks. And then that escalated over a couple of weeks to not only would I not leave the house, but I wouldn't let my mum leave the house then. I didn't want her to be out of the house. And even like my own siblings, who I love dearly, if they knocked on the door, it would send me into a panic like, don't want to see anyone, I don't speak to anyone, I can't function. So in the end, I actually begged the doctor to send me somewhere. And it was partly in the beginning, really, because I wanted my mum to have a break. Because I was like, she can't be a prisoner in her own home as well as me. And then that was piling on all the guilt and worry about that. And I had insurance with where I worked at the time. So they sent me to the Priory. And when I got there, they said, oh, well, how long have you got as an inpatient on your insurance? And they looked and it was a month. So they kept me there for a month. That's a whole other story and a whole other, like, that was wrong in my eyes. That was
Mm.
not, it didn't help.
Yeah.
So then I was in hospital, very heavily medicated. Um, and then after a month, they sent me on my merry way back into the world.
Mm.
I was none the wiser as to how I'd really got there. I, as I say, was very heavily medicated. So I was on, and I just need to say, Dan, for anyone that's listening, I'm not against medication. It's done me the world of good many times throughout my life. Um, but I don't believe that actually being in the situation that I was in, which was like the highest dose of antidepressant, beta blockers 4 times a day, and Valium, diazepam 4 times a day, like that was not helpful. That was just stopping me from physically having the symptoms of fear and panic, if you like. So yeah, so I went off into the world and sort of started to think, what do I do now? Like, how do I figure this out? How do I get my life back? And then that took me on a big mission to fix myself for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Trained as a psychotherapist, trained in and worked with CBT, DBT, NLP, hypnotherapy, you name it, I've done it.
Yeah. Well, my
Mm.
background was NLP and hypnotherapy, and I think when I think unknowingly at the time I wanted to do it for, to suppose help others, but it was I was trying to find something for me,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I never quite found it.
Yeah.
You know, if anything, I met some right monsters out of
Yeah,
nothing.
the problem is when we don't understand how we work as humans and that we don't understand that at our true core and our essence, we are completely whole and perfect in every way that we're not broken. When we don't understand that and we're looking for answers, to me, there's like an underlying dialogue or belief there that I'm broken and I need fixing. And what I found, and I don't know if this you found this, Dan, but every time I would do something to try and fix myself and it didn't work inevitably because it was just like a plaster that I was trying to put on temporarily, but not, not understanding really what was at the heart of it. If it didn't work, say if I was in a, so I used to go into relaxation classes. I went to meditation, but the way that I was at the time was like, right, meditation's the way forward. That's how you stop being anxious.
Mm,
So I didn't just stick on a meditation on YouTube. I went to a monastery because I wanted to meditate with monks. I wanted to be the best meditator that there was, And I
mm,
remember sitting so vividly, sitting in this room with all these people and this monk directing and sharing and sitting. And I'm sat there and in my head, I'm going, oh my God, get me out of here. I was so in my head about if I make a noise, if I disturb the peace, am I doing it right? That it was the most awful experience ever. And I never went back.
yeah.
And that doesn't mean that meditation, for example, can't be useful for people, that they can't enjoy it. Of course they can, but what's missing is this the understanding that no matter what it is that we're doing, we're still experiencing it through our own unique personal thinking. And so often I would then come away from these things going, oh, well, that's me, shows really how bad I am because that works for everyone else. It doesn't work for me. That
Mm,
works for everyone else. It doesn't work for me. So I just was piling on this story and this dialogue over and over again that things don't work for me because I'm really bad. Like I am really severe. And then all the professionals around me, innocently, this is not a criticism of them. And I've worked with some really lovely, compassionate professionals, but their dialogue was also, they never said to me I was broken, but their words were often, you just need to learn to manage it.
mm,
You're always going to have anxiety
yeah.
you know, and that generalized anxiety disorder diagnosis. I had acute panic disorder diagnosis and depression. And now I don't have any of those.
Yeah. And that's, I suppose, something very important in it for someone who's listening to hear the difference in, I suppose, a diagnosis and an experience of a feeling. Because I'm
Yeah.
presuming you still, at moments, can experience anxiety.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I don't know how much you know like of my story, Dan, but so the last 18 months I've gone through cancer treatment. Now, you would probably assume, understandably, that that would be really scary and frightening and awful. Now, at times, yes, it was extremely uncomfortable. Like physically going through chemo, I was so poorly and so unwell. But it wasn't driven by fear that it would have been years ago where I thought, I can't cope with this, I can't manage. So it was a very different experience that it
mm,
could have been because we can't, things happen. We can't control our external circumstances. I couldn't control the fact that I got cancer, but I certainly was able to experience it in a way that meant that I could still access peace of mind in those moments, where I got a bit of a breather or was able to still be in my life. My life didn't have to be completely on hold all of that time.
mm,
Um, and one of my favorite mentors, Dr. Bill Pettit, who I know you know too, is like I always share what he says, which is a diagnosis is where we're at. It's not who we are.
Mm.
just where we're at in any given moment. And at the time, I was at a place where I was generalized anxiety, I was panic, I was all of those, experiencing all of those things, but they weren't me. And now I'm not experiencing those things. That diagnosis isn't me.
Yeah.
And I think, and also another big thing for me that made me see that this understanding was really the missing part, the missing link in all of it was I've got an 18-year-old daughter and I've got a 3-year-old daughter. And my 18-year-old daughter, when I had her and I was training to be a psychotherapist, and I had no idea really of, what it meant to be human, the principles by Sydney Banks that, I eventually came across. And I was really, really severely anxious after she was born. Um, Again, diagnosed with postnatal anxiety and depression, put back on all medication. And fast forward to being in this understanding and seeing things, seeing the human experience for what it is and not fearing it. So I had my 3-year-old 3 years ago, and yes, of course, I was a little bit postnatal at times, teary, all the stuff that comes with your hormones being all over the place. But I didn't have that same scary experience that I had the first time around. And that is purely and simply because of what I understand now. And
Mm.
what was really interesting, Dan, is every time I went to an appointment, because it's on my records that I suffered with anxiety, everybody would ask or just prepare me for the fact that it's highly likely you're going to get that again because you've had it before. And I'm just nodding along and thinking, okay, whatever. I know that my experience has changed. I know that that's, you know, doesn't scare me anymore. And I'll just be with whatever shows up.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it was a very, very different experience. And I say that not, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, Dan, going, oh, look at me. But I say that because so many people out there believe that that has to be their experience forevermore, and it just doesn't.
Yeah. And no, and and the part of that there, honestly, it made me it made me smile inside, and it was that just being with whatever shows up, and that those few words is such there's such power there,
Yeah.
and and right at the beginning you mentioned about how people wouldn't have known you was going through what you were going through, and that's the thing in it. I think as people, when we're going through these experiences, we feel like it's just us.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And sorry,
No, I was just gonna say because that's what the ego, the personal thinking that we have would have us believe,
yeah,
the stories, that's
yeah,
defining us as being, being different or being, and in the nicest possible way, none of us are that unique in a way. Like we
mm,
have a unique experience, but we are all the same and we're all equally resilient and
yeah,
capable and able to access that peace of mind, but we just don't always know that that's the way it can be.
mm, yeah. And I suppose with the just being with it, what does that look like for you now, then, Sarah?
So, as I mentioned, the last 18 months has been tough. Like you know, anyone again listen to this that's been affected by cancer or has had cancer, or you hear those words and something shifts that I don't know that you ever see life the same again. Um, and people say to me, "Oh, you're such a fighter. You've done so amazing to get through all of this." And yet, to me, it's been the opposite. I've had to stop fighting and I've had to surrender and give in and let my body do what it does beautifully. Like one of the things going through chemo, which is been for me the worst part of all of it, in the moments where I feel the most ill I've ever felt in my life, I have also been in absolute awe of my body and what it does, you know, and how it regenerates. The fact that I'm sat here with this messy, crazy hair, but actually not long ago I was bald, and you know, you're your body really feels it when chemotherapy therapy goes in it. It's like your body notices that it's poison and it wants rid of it, and it does a really good job of that. And it does a really good job of alerting you as to what you need, but you just need to be quiet enough to hear it.
mm,
And so I've definitely feel that the way I see that has gone to another level in a way. So I was, I'd say, pretty accepting of my experience before most of the time. And don't get me wrong, sometimes, like all of us, I'm totally in my head and it's a very different experience. But I feel like this has been the thing in my life where I've really genuinely had to let go.
mm,
I've had to let go. I've had to, and by letting go, I mean I've had to, in those moments, literally go moment to moment, like
yeah,
literally look no further than the next minute.
mm. And just do the next step and
Yeah. Just be
move
in the
on.
next moment and be, and also trust that I don't know what comes in the next minute or the next. And again, going through treatment, it's weird because you feel like you've never been felt so ill in your whole life, and then you can't imagine feeling better. And then 7 days later, you're like, oh, I can get up and walk about. I'm not going to throw up. I'm not going to wow. And it's, your state of mind fluctuates and as it does for all of us. But when your level of consciousness then starts to come up again, and it's like, oh, there is a big wide world out there. I am okay. It's that, letting go and letting consciousness and, your human experience do its thing and
Mm.
just going along for the ride made it a lot easier for
Yeah,
me, I believe.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thanks for sharing that, Sarah. That's great.
Okay.
Um, I wanted to ask you about your interpretation of ego, because this is something I think um, you can hear a lot of. You
Mm.
know, it's your ego and ego this and ego that. And I seen you share yesterday a snippet of the ego doesn't create, it commentates. Would you be able to talk to that and kind of share your view on what the ego is?
Mhm. Well, I think in society and we talk about ego as though it's like this arrogance that people have. And we will say, oh, that person's got a big ego or that, and really, but we all have ego. Because for me, it's really just your personal thinking. It's the thinking that you have made up from the stories and the identity that you've given to yourself that's kind of been there and you've gone, yep, that's me. I'll take that. I'll have that bit. And we create this identity. And so it's not about arrogance, because the ego is the bit that might tell you you need to be the best and you need to be amazing, but it's also the bit that tells you you're not good enough. It's the story, it's the identity. And the more when we listen to it and we see it innocently as truth, we can find ourselves going along paths that we don't want to, or having experience of other people that, again, is just part of our version of that and our perception. So to me, it all comes down to, in its simplest form, it's just our personal thinking.
Mm,
It's not something that one person has, and it's not an arrogance. It's just a whole load of stories and identity that we've given ourselves, and often we want to fiercely protect
yeah.
because we see it as truth. And touching on before when we were saying about surrendering and letting go is I've been seeing more of that as well, because it's like I see where that personal thinking or ego or whatever you want to call it pops up, in the treatment stage. It's the bits where it's like, why me? It's
Mm,
not fair. Um, and I'm not saying it's okay, not okay to have those thoughts, but the difference between having them and then making them part of my identity
yeah.
of who I
Yeah.
am and who and how I experience things.
Mm, yeah. And I think, and it's important to kind of acknowledge there is that like the personal thinking that's not going away, and that's something you kind of learn to, I suppose, have a different relationship with. and that
Yeah, we don't need to
awareness.
go up there.
Yeah, the awareness
Yeah.
of when it's trying to bite you in the bum and say come up with these judgments of how you should be living your life, what you should be doing and those kind of things. There's a different feeling to it, isn't there?
Yeah, it's noticing it is all that's required. Like as soon as we notice that, for me, we're automatically coming back to our default, which is presence and, you know, that pureness of that essence that's within each of us. Is like we come back to that. As soon as we notice, we come back to that. And, for many years I would see that, certain thoughts to be bad and, I shouldn't be doing this and shouldn't be thinking like that. And one of the big things in the beginning when I came across this understanding is like coming across this understanding and I should know better now. I should be able to recognize those thoughts I'm falling into the trap of believing because I know the principles and yet over time I've started to see less of what's good and what's bad and just seeing it as it's all just an experience, that I'm in my head or in my life and I can label that in any way that I want, but ultimately it's all just part of the human experience. And the difference for me is I don't fear that.
Mm.
And that's what I believe means I don't get stuck there for long.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm smiling again because those when I kind of was into my NLP and uh, I NLP'd myself. I was trying to I was trying to change I was trying to change my bad thoughts that I had
Mhm.
months before, and I kept them alive by trying to change them.
Yeah. It's like I always say it's like a bit of a basic analogy, but you've got a wood burning fire and you want to go off to bed and you want it to go out, but you just keep adding logs on it.
Mm,
It's like it's not going out. Like, why are you adding logs? Like, oh well, because this log just looked at me and it was really enticing and it looked like it wanted to be there, so I put it on. It's like it's gonna keep going, it's gonna keep building.
yeah,
And like you said, it's understanding the true nature of thought is not about learning how to get rid of bad ones and change them to good ones. It's seeing that they're all neutral anyway. And actually, what it's the same with moods for me. I used to be so hell bent on not being in a bad mood or thinking if I was in a bad mood that there was a problem and I had to solve it. And now I don't see it as good or bad moods. I just see it as a different level of consciousness and just a different experience. And actually, weirdly, when I'm in a lower level of consciousness, I don't mind it so much because what I've started to notice is I actually see it as an alarm, a love letter, whatever you want to call it, to just get back present and be, give myself more compassion. And I'm a lot better at doing that now. And so it's not a bad mood anymore. It's just a different level of consciousness where actually I'm quite nice to myself down there.
yeah, yeah. And obviously, you shared earlier about having a 3-year-old. I've got a 3-year-old girl.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got a 5-year-old girl, and
Wow.
I've got a baby on the way as well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
Congratulations.
yeah. So I'm. It's funny because I can be. You'll know. I can be at home and the kids are doing things, and then they'll do something, and then I'll kind of I never lose my shit, but I'm I'm reactive,
Yeah.
and I'm wanting them to. I'm trying to manage them, to
Yeah.
stop doing things and
Want them to behave.
yeah, and
Yeah.
getting very uptight about how they should be. And I think Dickens shares, doesn't he, about parenting from a good feeling,
Mhm. Yeah.
and that's what I'm starting to see more now.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I'm more than happy to put myself on the chopping block here and say that one of my biggest blind spots, well, it's not even a blind spot because I'm very aware of it, but a trap that I regularly fall into with my 3-year-old Well, I do lose my shit, Dan. I have lost my shit. And, what that looks like for me is crying, wanting to run away forever. Like, it is been really tough. Um, there's, some dynamics through us having gone through treatment where um, she has been primarily looked after by a dad. When she's been in and seen me so ill, she doesn't like it, and she almost got a bit scared of being on her own with me because she could see that I was really ill. Um, and so her way of coping and dealing with that was to be not very nice to me, to push me away, all of that stuff that would make sense. But as I've started to come round, and then it's more like we're going back into a family unit as opposed to, me being in a separate room all the time, all of that, and again, a risk of infection. But her behavior is extremely questionable a lot of the time. She's a very strong-willed, knows what she wants, will not back down, the stubbornness, and sometimes she's really hard work.
Mm.
But as you've said, the last few months, she's turned a bit of a corner. We've been really consistent with our boundaries. We've tried as much as we can to parent from like that good feeling. And then this last week, we had 3 days of hell with her again. And to me, it's really obvious that the state of mind of me and my husband is the big driving factor in that.
Mm.
Because instead of me having patience and showing her love, because when she's having an absolute meltdown, an almighty meltdown, the only thing that actually ever works eventually to bring her out is I just say to her, I'm here if you want a hug. And sometimes I don't even say those words. I just open my arms to her as if to say, do you want a hug? And sometimes she go, no, go away. I don't like you. Go away. I hate you. She's even so, gosh, she's literally broken my heart a million times in the last year. She's even said to me, I don't want you to live here anymore. Go and live with my big sister who's at university. I'm like, I wish. But the only thing really that ever really brings her out of that, and she's learning to regulate a little bit by herself now, but is literally me just being there with my arms open. And then if she says no, for me to just respect that. And then I might give it a few more minutes and I do it again. And eventually she will always eventually come for that hug. And then she calms down. But obviously in the last few days where it was difficult again, I wasn't in a headspace to go, here's a hug. I'm like, why is this so stressful? We've got a chapel by the sea and we go there and it's like, we've come here, it's beautiful, like we're here to enjoy, we should be enjoying ourselves. And no, we're running around after her. She spoils everything. That's what's in my head.
Mm.
And so when I'm in my head with all of that, it doesn't make sense to me to go, do you want a hug?
Yeah.
Because I'm here like, oh, why should it's not like this? And I suppose the reason I'm saying that is that, like, again, I could judge myself like, oh, I'm a terrible parent. I wasn't there. She's only 3. Like, I'm the one that should know. Shouldn't be on her to regulate. But it's all rubbish because at the end of the day, I'm human. She's human.
Yeah.
And if I'd judged myself a lot, then I would probably stay stuck. Whereas we came home and then my level of consciousness definitely risen. I felt different. I felt in a better feeling. And the way that I then responded to her was different. And we're back to, you know, the cuddles, the loving,
Yeah.
the going to bed with books. It's all very lovely and calm. Whereas, only days before it was an extremely different
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. I can resonate with all that. Um, One thing I was just thinking about, sorry, was because my when I got lost, it was lost in anxiety,
Mhm.
and again, innocently thinking that I had to try and figure it all out, trying to, why am I thinking that, and kind of really getting lost in the
Mhm.
content.
Yeah.
you talk a lot about moving from anxiety to freedom.
Mhm.
You know, what does that look like then?
Okay. So freedom from anxiety doesn't mean never feeling anxious. I will still experience feelings of anxiety, but the difference for me is that they're very few and far between, and I'm not scared of it. That is the big, big thing. And so when we're free, it means that we can have feelings, all feelings, including anxiety. It's a fight or flight is a really useful survival mechanism that we need, and without it, we'd probably be dead. But we can have all of it without it having to take over our lives, without it having to dictate. I used to, first thing I'd do in the morning, Dan, when I'd wake up, is the thought would pop in my head, am I anxious? Inevitably, the answer would be yes. And then it'd be like, right, what do I do to get through the day? What do I cancel? What can I do? Do I take the car instead of the train? Because then can stop if I need to, or I can come home when I need. Like it would just be before I've even barely opened my eyes, I'm in the fixing of the anxiety mode. And you might be able to relate to this, but I, even when my thinking would fall away temporarily, which it always will, I'd go back to it. Right, what was I anxious about before? Because I didn't finish figuring it out. I hadn't finished problem solving, and I'd consciously
Yeah.
bring it back into my awareness. I'd rack my brain for it because I'd see it like as a thing that I needed to
Mm.
get rid of. And but again, going through my cancer diagnosis, when I first heard that word, I didn't go into panic. I actually felt really, really sad. I don't know if it was scared. Yeah, there was some fear, but it's different to me than panic that. And again, the first few nights after being told I had it, and I didn't know whether it was terminal. I knew had spread because it was in my lymph nodes, so I knew it was like quite late stages. And I'd go to bed and I'd lay in bed at night and fall asleep. And then I'd wake up and it was as if I hadn't even had a chance to consider it. And I'd be like almost bolt upright. Oh my God, I've got cancer. Like literally, felt like it was automatic. Now that is scary. But the difference is that I would be in that fear and then my brain would be going wild, like what are you going to do? What if it's this? What if it's that stage? What if you are going to die? What about your kids? All of this stuff going around and around. I remember one night, I think it was the second night after I'd been told I had it, and my mum lives with us, and I just went into my mum's room and I just said, Mum, I feel really scared. I don't know. I don't need you to do anything. I don't need you to say anything. I don't know what I'm here. I was just verbal diarrhea to her, just offloading. And then my mind just settled and I said, I'm okay now. I'm going back to bed. I went and got back in bed. I went to sleep. But years ago, I wouldn't have been able to feel that intense, momentary in my head panic, fear, and then it would settle. I would then bring it back because I'm like, no, this is really serious. And I'd be on Google and I'd be Googling potential outcomes and what do I need to do? And like we were saying before about adding fuel to that fire, I'd be constantly trying to figure it out.
Mm.
Whereas the difference now is I can go into that headspace of like, oh my God, anybody who thinks about not being here for their children is going to feel something.
Yeah.
But now the difference is that I recognize that that's an experience from in my head. And when I get that momentary quiet, which we do all get, I notice it and I stay with it and I just go back to sleep or whatever it is that I'm doing in my life. Um, and that just gives for a very, very different experience of life that isn't full of fear.
Yeah.
You know,
So, do you feel like applying techniques helps to get a lot more lost in that
it
sense?
certainly did for me.
Yeah.
What it did is it added a whole layer of judgment of not getting it right, it not working. And there was a huge desperation in my looking for techniques and fixes because in my mind, I was like, I don't want to live like this for the rest of my life. This is too difficult. Like, this is hard, you know, and it might sound really strange, but even like when I felt that bad, I'd even like fantasize about getting ill because at least it would just take the anxiety away and I'd, you know, end up, you know, if I ended up, because I would, you know, never intentionally not be here. But actually, if my life was cut short for whatever reason, I wouldn't be too bothered because it's really hard. And actually, you know, all of those things would just be like, yep, see, it's another thing that doesn't work. It's another thing that doesn't work. And I think a part of like the brain's way of protecting us is thinking, well, this is going to stop one day.
Yeah.
Um, and actually now, you know, the irony is I'm in this position and I want to be here for as long as I can because, you know, I get to play now. I talk a lot with my clients about pressing play. I get to press play on life now. I get to have the fun and the experience and see it for really what it is, which is a temporary human experience that we're having. I get to make the most of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I think it's so easy to take it all really serious and
Very
as
easy.
though there is, you know, a right way to do things.
Yeah. You know, it's really ironic because I'm sat here talking to you now in a hotel because I'm going to a funeral at 12:30. And in the past, I would have not done anything in the morning because I'm going to a funeral and I need to be sad and I need to be thinking about that and how am I going to be and how and actually we can have we're having moment to moment experiences constantly all the time. It's changing and evolving and you know another thing people have said to me, how do you go from being in your life doing stuff with your 3-year-old or whatever to then client mode so quick? Like, how do you switch on work mode?
Mm.
And for me, there's no switching on to be done when we're present.
Yeah.
I just go from that moment to the next moment. And that has given me, again, a lot of freedom to be in my life in between the moments where I am in my head or I am in the feelings that feel intense, that it doesn't, you know, we don't have to write off our whole day or our whole week because of a feeling, because, you know, like as Sid Banks says that you're only ever one thought away from a very different feeling. And, you know, it's not about switching on versions of ourselves. It's about just being in each moment as much as we can and the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah. I the more I suppose see, I came across the principles in 2020, just after my
Is that
first daughter.
lockdown? Was
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
lockdown?
Just after my first daughter born, I went up to do a retreat with Dave and Jen in Wales.
Oh, nice.
And over the years now, with things have just, I suppose, my understanding's just grown and changed. And the more it's changed, the more I look at how the simplicity of it, and and then it's not a judgment, but it's the how do the professionals, the psychologists, there's a lot of professionals helping people that see it the opposite way.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
And I was one of them.
yeah, and I
You know, I
remember.
worked in that.
Sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry, Dan, there's a little delay, isn't there?
Yeah,
Just saying that, yeah, that's how I worked, and that was my belief for many years.
yeah, yeah. And again, it's there's no judgment. I was looking at a picture of. I got given. I had counselling years ago, and the counsellor at the end of it, she used the metaphor of like this broken vase, and it's been put back together with these gold seams, but there's these pieces missing. Uh, and as nice as that is, part of me took that on as like I've got these. broken bits,
Yeah.
and that's just how it is,
Mhm.
and that's just not true.
No. And isn't it lovely that you can see now that that's not true?
Mm, yeah. So, in terms of your relationship with your experience, how has that changed since you first came across the principles to like now?
Well, I think as our understanding deepens, which I feel that mine definitely has, I see things differently all the time, and I have insights all the time. I've had a lot of insights going through treatment. Like it's like they've come thick and fast. Um, I think that comes partly with giving in and just almost being an observer of my whole experience. But actually, my life started to change right from the beginning when I look back now. So I wrote a book right in the early days when I came across these principles. I started my membership, which has been going over 10 years now. And if I looked back at some of the videos in there, and I would be able to tell that my understanding was not the way it is now, but
Mm.
it was still looking in the right direction. And it was
Yeah.
still an understanding that was changing my life immeasurably right from the off. Now, I'm pretty sure I could probably listen to this podcast with you and I in 10 years' time and see that my understanding has changed and deepened then. But that's the beauty of it. It's like a constant, I, hand on heart, will be exploring this and remaining curious until the day that I die, because my experience is that, I came into it for anxiety to fix my anxiety, and I got so much more out of it than I ever knew possible. As in, my relationship, there was nothing wrong with my relationship. It was a good relationship. But actually, now the way I experience the relationship feels very different at times because
Mm.
I understand that it comes from my insecurity. I understand that it's an inside out experience, and that has enriched. It's taken my it's taken my stubbornness away. My husband might not agree, but it's that, if we would something would happen where we disagree, my stubbornness would be like, I'm digging my heels in until I am heard and this is right and this is, whereas it's just like taking away all of, well, we still do it sometimes, but taking away stuff like that, it's just so freeing of like, oh, I can experience this differently. I
Mm.
can feel differently about my experience in all of this. And, for me, it's really freeing. And, we were talking about ego before. One of the other things I remember after my getting my diagnosis was sitting there, and my worry was about my kids. How do you, because at this stage I didn't tell my 18-year-old because I knew the first question she was going to ask me is, are you going to die? And I didn't know the answer. So I didn't want to have that conversation without that answer. And so she didn't know, so I was keeping it a secret, although she's a bit of a detective. So she was figuring out something wasn't quite right. In fact, she actually said to me at one point, "It's Jodie got cancer, who's my sister." So I was thinking about that. I was thinking the 3-year-old's okay. She's not even going to be any the wiser. She's not even going to know if I'm not here. But then I was like, but I need to be here because I need to give her everything I've given my other daughter, who is now kind of an adult. And I feel like, I've given her enough that she can go on about her life and know that she's loved and da, 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 all of this stuff. And then I just had a little quiet moment. And I was like, that's just all ego. That's me telling myself my kids will not cope without me. They will not function without me. I need to be here for them. And as much as obviously they would want their mum around as long as possible, they are also completely whole without me.
Mm.
And in that moment, that insight, which is hard to put into words, but it was just a feeling, I was suddenly like, oh, well, that means I can just focus on me and getting well because I don't need to place all this focus on them.
Yeah.
And that was also really freeing.
Yeah. That's great, is that? And I think that kind of you can kind of relate that to, helping others in or help or wanting other people to see something.
Yeah.
You feel like when you're giving something away, um, they're not necessarily going to hear,
No.
and there's no. It's always on the person, isn't
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
themselves to.
We know ourselves that we can be in conversations and, you know, we could all be in the same conversation, three, four, five of us in the same conversation. None of us are going to experience that conversation in the same way.
Yeah.
You know, I did a family's manual years ago for people to share with their kids, and one of the examples in there that I used, which was really basic, is like you can walk along the street and you and your friend come across a stranger who's got a dog, and the stranger starts to talk to you, and you have this little 2-minute conversation, and the stranger with the dog carries on. And then your friend says, "Oh, what a weirdo." And you're like, "Oh, I thought they were really nice." And then I get them to explore like, what is it? What's in your thinking that's different to their thinking? Just highlighting that it's different. It's like, well, if you're a dog person and you love dogs and or you're just thinking about stroking this dog and you assume the owner's really nice because you like dogs, the other person sees it differently. And just, and it sounds really basic, but the more we see that,
Mm,
for me, the more we don't have to be fearful of the experience of life because we just see how transient it is.
yeah. And none of those kind of descriptions or opinions of the dog are true, other than the dog,
It's just the
just
same.
a dog, you know.
Yeah, there was a thing on TikTok actually that I really liked, again showing like the power of thought and how our senses bring it to life. And again, it works quite nicely with kids. I was talking about it last night in my membership with someone who teaches and say, look around the room and pick an item and imagine if you licked it, what it would taste like. Now, if I look around this room, the radiator, the chair, the desk, the curtains, I can imagine what that tastes like. And yet, I have never gone and licked the curtain.
Yeah.
And that's the power. Something could even make you gag. Why does it make you gag? Because all of the senses have come through your thinking of like, this is now an experience I'm having at the hands of my thoughts. And there's so much power in that.
Yeah. I've
But
just licked the radiator and it was quite smooth.
was it nice and smooth done? Make sure it's not turned on to the max. You might end up
Yeah.
with a sore tongue.
Burn me tongue.
But the, but that's the thing. It's like we can do that. We create realities
Mm,
in our mind. We create them. And again, we could look at that as really scary, or we could look at that as like really freeing and
yeah.
exciting and play. It's funny because I used to be such a control freak. Like there's still some areas where my control freakiness comes out. I've had recent situations. I'm like, oh wow, you really want to be in control of that, and I'm noticing things. But I was in a control freak around everything, and I felt that's what I needed to do to be responsible and to survive and to do well in life. Was I had to be in control of everything. And now, for most areas in my life where I don't have my blind spots, I'm totally good with not being in control.
Mm,
And it actually excites me because for me, if we're not in control, we have no idea what comes next. That it just means there's endless possibilities,
mm,
endless opportunities, endless possibilities, as
yeah.
opposed to this is how things are going to be. And if, I need to make sure they go this way. For me, that's exciting.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. Sorry, as we come towards the end, I always ask people if there was one simple thing that you'd want people to know, to see, or to realize about life, what would it be?
It's short.
Mm,
And I don't want that to be it's short. Oh my God, control it. And, you know, it's funny because we all know that we're going to not be here one day. That's the one thing that we absolutely know for sure, but we don't know how or when or any of that stuff. And again, for me, that can be scary, but actually being faced with that, oh my God, life is actually really short. For the first time ever, I really saw that came with a newfound freedom of it's so temporary. I'm just gonna flipping enjoy it. I'm just gonna press play right now and be in it.
Mm,
That's it. That's the only job I have to do is just to press play and be in it
yeah.
because it is short and it's temporary. So grab it by the balls and enjoy it.
Yeah. Press play, grab it by the balls. Job's a good
Yeah, that is my words of wisdom.
one. Sarie, thank you so much.
It's my
Really
pleasure.
appreciate your time.
My pleasure.